Welcome back to the Working on the Dad Pod. I'm Alex. With me, as always, is Ethan. And today we're working on sports fandom, how to parent around that, how we grew up as kids with parents who are into sports, and that sort of weird mix, the cosmic gumbo, if you will, of being a sports fan, moving, relocating. Neither of us live where we grew up. We'll get into all that kind of stuff. But Ethan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm getting over strep throat. I'm on the literal end of it. And, I'm excited about this topic because, it's something that is insignificant but important to me. So,
Yeah,
that's the kind of fun
this
stuff.
definitely does not fall into like the life-changing parenting things. Like I think
Sure.
that, there's not a lot here that's gonna, like I don't know. I don't want to overspeak. I was going to say this isn't something that's going to like change your relationship with your kids, but I actually think it can.
It
You
can.
know, maybe
I've
not in
seen
a
it.
life or death, but it depends on how intensely you take things,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how you let it affect future decisions, right?
Hmm.
Um, but let's start off with
Yeah.
some wins and losses.
So
You got a win, or
I
we can start
do.
off with a loss.
No. I'm going to start off with a win because it
Okay.
happened today. It actually doesn't have anything to do with parenting other than the fact that it happened at the end of preschool drop off.
Okay.
Uh, for those of you who have heard me say this before, I handle preschool drop off most days. I drop the kids off at school and then I continue my walk. I go to the local Panera because Alex turned me on to the Unlimited Sip Club. And as I was coming out of Panera today with my drink and my wife's after work Dr. Pepper, because it's not just for coffee, that Unlimited Sip Club, I uh, there was a young mid-20s woman who was blind who stopped me, and she asked me, well, she wasn't, pardon, she wasn't fully blind. She said she could see like about very blurry, like 3 feet around her, but for all intents and purposes, she was legally blind. And
Okay.
yeah, and she said to me, "Hey, I'm looking for X address. I used to like live here, but I feel like things are so much different than when I left." And I said, "Oh, yeah, it's actually that way. I'm going that way, so I'm happy to walk you." So it turns out she was going literally like 50 yards away from my house. So
Okay.
um, I walked her there. There was some construction, so I helped her in situations where the ground was uneven, and I honestly just felt like really good that I, even in November of 2023, when the world is scary, I trusted my instincts to do a random act of kindness for someone, and I'm glad I
There
could
you
help.
go.
And that
There you go.
there's not a lot of that these days. So this is honestly not like to like toot my own horn and be like, "Yay me, I'm a great person." It actually just felt made me feel really good to like help somebody.
Yeah.
Um,
No, for
yeah,
sure, for sure. I
yeah,
think anytime you do something, you know, where you feel like you've really helped somebody, it makes your day better.
yeah,
So yeah, that's definitely a win. Like you said, not so much a parenting win, but a win, absolutely, unequivocally a win.
yeah.
Um, so for me, I've had a couple of wins because it's been a couple of weeks because of your strep that we've recorded. But I've had a couple of wins, but the one that really was awesome was this past weekend. My daughter turned 5. Right, so big milestone, and it's a little bit of a combo win and loss. But on the one hand, I was with my son all weekend without my daughter and my wife. And that was because they went up to New York City for the weekend. They had a girls' trip. They did some shopping. My daughter got gift cards. She got toys. They got their nails done. They did brunch. They did everything. Had a great time. Met up with some friends, met up with some family. And so me and my son were hanging out. And honestly, we had a fantastic time. We didn't do nearly as much. Like, I had a bunch of different activities and places and ideas of places I wanted to take him. But what ended up happening is, like, I ended up turning on football, in the early afternoon. And he just sort of started watching it with me, which is going to, lead into our conversation a little bit. But just like crawling up on my lap and like sitting there for a little bit. And then maybe he'd bring me a book and, you know, I'd empty the dishwasher and he'd play. And he was just the happiest little dude. And we did that on Saturday. And on Sunday, we like did some grocery shopping and some other things, did some random like normal errands. But like, other than one trip to the playground, he was just content to like hang out at home. And I don't mean it in a way of like, he was fine. Like, dude was legitimately happy. And we had like a lot of like little mini moments within there of just like our pure joy. But the reason it's kind of a loss is because at the same time, my daughter was having the time of her life. And like, I was having a little bit of FOMO of like, I'm in Florida, she's in New York City, and I'm like missing her birthday. And like, all I got to see of my daughter, like physically on her birthday, was a 5 a.m. wake up where she gave me a hug before they left for the airport. So, that was a little bittersweet, but it was a really solid weekend. And the win's not like parenting my son, but the win is like we had a better than expected time. I had set the bar at like he's going to be a little rough because he's used to having mom around. He's a bit of a mama's.
Mm.
He's having his sister around, and I'm like, honestly, like y'all could go on every weekend because he was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I've had a few. I'm normally, as you know, like alone on Saturdays with the girls, but that's just normally like a day. But I did recently have um the weekend or like the overnight situation also with my wife in New York. So it is nice when it goes better than expected, you know. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
So.
always nice. And like I've had nights where like I've put the kids down to bed, or
Mm,
I'm sure there's definitely nights when it was before my son was born where like my wife was away. There was a time when my daughter was like 7 months old, and my wife was away for a long weekend, for a work related thing. And so we've definitely had a lot of those, but this was the first one where it was just me and my son. And so
mhm.
it was a different dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Than we've had days together and plenty of times
Mhm,
together where it's just me and him, but like the whole bedtime process, waking up, him being like, "Mama, sissy," and I'm like, "Hey, bud, they're not here." And then we just went about our day, and he's a happy-go-lucky kid. So yeah,
yeah.
it was a nice little time. What about your loss?
Yeah. So my wife, my daughter is a little over a week away from turning 4,
Hmm.
and she is recently doing this overtly acting like a baby in the most inconvenient times. And she also, it is being coupled with losing patience and intense overreactions. For example, if I just say, hey, we're trying to get bedtime going, can you please stop acting like a baby and go brush your teeth? She'll yell and say, don't talk to me. You're not being nice. Mind your own business. And I'll be like, one, you are my business because I'm your dad. Two, I'm not being unkind. I'm not particularly being nice. I just asked you to stop acting like a baby, but I think you're overreacting slightly. And then, it continues, and she goes into this like raging outburst of crying, and it results in like I have to raise my voice because she can't hear me. To the like not like yelling, but it's like my volume's just going up, and
Sure,
then
sure. There's a matter of necessity.
yeah. And
Yeah,
then it results in like her getting stuff taken away, which cries more. And it's just like all you had to do was like walk up the stairs without making it take an hour. And like this could have been totally avoided.
yeah, and like, I am no stranger to this.
Yeah.
This happened to me
Yeah.
tonight, and
Yeah,
here's the thing
same.
about it. Here's the thing about it, right? I can't tell you why I was told that I was being mean
Right.
because I don't remember, because I didn't care and it wasn't true. And the fact of the matter is, right? Like, you and your wife have a bedtime routine that is like very much like she's dealing with the baby, you're dealing with the toddler. You guys sort of have that divide and conquer mentality. And you've got a slightly, larger house. And obviously you guys can hear things going on, but like we have, compared to your place, like we just have a very small house. And the bathroom where this is usually happening, because it's usually happening over brushing teeth or
Mm-hmm.
going potty, flossing or getting PJs on, is right next to the room that my son's getting his pajamas on and getting his diaper changed and all that stuff. And so my daughter will sprint out of the room, like frustrated, and run to my wife and be like, "Daddy's being mean." And my wife will be like, "I heard everything.
Mm-hmm.
So don't say what you think you're about to say, because I heard him." And, some version of "I heard you being a butt." Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it is very funny because it happens a lot when it's just like, I think they're overwhelmed by rules and people telling them what to do. And at end of the day, especially, they don't have the mentality. And when I can catch myself and let my daughter sort of process through it just a little bit, of like even negotiating with her instead of like her saying, "You're being mean, blah, 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 I don't want to talk about it," and then like raising my voice and being like, "Okay, but you got to do it," and keeping on my same cadence. If I can break myself out of my rhythm and sit down and say, "Okay, what's going on? You want to be a baby? Can I treat you like a baby? Can I carry you? Can I
Well,
carry you like a baby? Can I brush your teeth for you, little baby, so that your teeth don't fall out? You've got big teeth for a baby." And sometimes if I get into it with her, but figure out ways to accommodate it, then she'll go along because she's like, "Dad's pretending with me," and like not even necessarily realize that I'm also getting the stuff done, because I'm
mm-hmm.
like, I want her to be able to do it herself. I want to
Sure.
not have to sit there and do it every night, but I'm also like, is the
So,
battle going to be worth it tonight?
so I think for us, it's less about like, because she's going to do the stuff. She's just making it take super long, and she's also like, I think this is, I don't want to say like delayed, but I feel like she went so long not trying to act like a baby because there was a new baby that we're now that our younger one is 14 months in, it's like now starting. And I tried to like explain to her that like, and this is, and this, if you listen to our mini me episode, um, she's just better at being me than me. So I tried to say to her, I was like, hey, if you're a baby, then you can't turn 4. And I was expecting her to be like, why? And then I'd be like, well, because, if you're 4, like, you're not a baby. And I had like all these canned answers ready to go. But what she asks me is who's going to stop me from turning 4? And I was like, and like, it was like a
What a
genuine
super villain response. Like, "You're gonna stop me, big guy." Okay.
it wasn't even to be sarcastic. She was just like, she was genuinely concerned. And I was like, the age people?
I didn't have an answer for that one. That wasn't in my FAQ sheet here.
Yeah, I was just like, the age people? And she was like, oh. And I was like, I don't, because sometimes, because sometimes, like, we tell her she can't go to the, like, playground, or like, if we're at the playground and we see that it's about to rain, we'll be like, oh, it's raining, or it's going to rain soon, so we have to go. And she'll be like, oh, because the rain people are coming. And we're like, yeah, sure. And so now, so like the age people was like, all I could come up with in like the quick moment. But so, it's like the one question I didn't expect her to come at me with, she did.
Who's gonna stop me?
Yeah, who's gonna stop me from turning 4? Yeah. So that was fun.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so my loss for the week before we get into the sports thing, and I think mine will be a little shorter, but my son has been on a tear of throwing things. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's been watching football, watching baseball. Well, maybe it's not that because I'm very much team like kids don't actually emulate the TV shows and video games as much as policymakers want to think they do. But he just likes throwing things. But he likes throwing everything. It could be a ball. You could be meaning to throw it, or it could be like tonight a water bottle at his sister's face.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it sort of runs the gamut, and he can say throw, and so he'll be like, throw, whap, and you're like, no, no throw, and he's like smiling a big smile, like I threw it, I said throw, Sissy's
Mm-hmm.
crying, and you're just like,
Yeah, direct hit,
nope,
Dad.
that's that's not okay. And so he'll do that, and he like bonk people with things, and like we try like taking it away, right? We try taking the thing away, and then he just finds something else and throws that. Like so many things are throwable when you care zero, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what happens to this, throw it.
Yeah.
And so that has been a struggle for us. And I don't have some, it's not a silver lining loss. It's like we're just grinning and bearing it until he can sort of get through it. Because I'm not going to like start chucking things back at him. We're trying not convince our daughter not to like retaliate because
Right.
she kind of like she had a thing at the gym the other day where like he threw something or pulled her hair or did something and she came at him with the safety scissors and we're like, yeah, that's not okay.
No,
Like
no, no.
don't retaliate. She's like, but he hit me. I'm like, I don't care. Like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
care. Um so yeah,
yeah.
that's been quite the adventure that I'm just hoping we get over, and we're really trying to work on not reacting very much. Just go no or ow or that hurt, and not giving him much more feedback than that. And my daughter's like the weak link in the chain where she's
Sure.
like that hurt. Ah, ah. I'm like, that's the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway,
Just working on his gross motor skills, or fine
yeah,
motor
he's
skills.
getting
I
good
forget
at
which
it.
one. Yeah,
Gross. Yeah, you got fine
sure.
motor skills and gross motor skills. Fine's
Hmm.
writing. Yeah, he's getting good at it. But we went to like a little harvest festival thing for Halloween, and there was a bag toss, and he actually made it in one of the buckets with like a little bean bag. And
Oh, nice. Future
he's
cornholer.
got a yeah. We'll see. He's got a little arm on him, but for a 20-month-old. But speaking of arms and
Yeah.
sports, to tonight's big topic, right? And so we were talking a little bit before the show, and we have interesting, I think if you grow up with parents, a parent, both parents, uncles, family members who really like sports, it can definitely become part of your childhood and part of your life. And I know for me, it played a pretty big role in my life because, as I mentioned before, my parents divorced when I was pretty young. And sports were like that through line that I always had with my dad, especially, right? I went to some sporting events with my mom. I was interested in it, but like my dad and I had a real kinship over sports when I was a kid. And so growing up, not just like watching sports on TV, but going to sports, I grew up in um, the Research Triangle area of North Carolina. So I grew up in Durham. My dad lived in Chapel Hill. That's where Duke and UNC respectively are. NC State's close by. So I grew up with like a huge love for like college sports and things like that. What about you? How was sports
Yeah.
sort of in your childhood?
Yeah. So, I of course, my younger brother and I were born in Los Angeles, but my parents are both from New York. My mom only actually cares about the Yankees. My
Okay.
dad was also a Yankee fan, as well as he was a Syracuse fan because that's where he went to college, and then uh, he basically moved on to the Lakers once he moved to California, but he was still a Yankee fan, and my parents worked really hard to get my brother and I to have the Yankees stick. And I'll be honest, it worked for a little bit when we were younger because of two things. One, the Yankees had won 4 World Series in a 5-year span, and when you're a little kid, winning's cool.
Sure.
Two, the Dodgers got rid of everybody good when I was a kid, starting with like getting rid of Mike Piazza, who went on to have
Right.
an amazing career, and then the Dodgers just kind of sucked. So
Hmm.
there was an opportunity there for the Yankees to really stick on my brother and I, but it did not stick on me. I would actually rate uh, Yankees, Boston, and Philadelphia fans as like some of the worst humans out there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're gonna
So
hit three large metropolis areas. We're gonna alienate them, and
yes,
we're gonna try and grow
exactly.
this podcast bootstrapping it.
Yeah, yeah,
No.
yeah,
Phillies fans, Red Sox fans, get at us in the comments. Yankees
yeah.
fans, you know, both of our dads are Yankees fans, and those are right now two of our very few confirmed listeners.
Yeah.
So
It's all
we're
right.
really just alienating left and right here.
I
But
actually had no idea your dad was a Yankees fan. How did that happen?
he spent elementary school living in New Jersey.
Oh, did not know that about
Like,
your dad.
yeah, he spent elementary school. So he was born in North Carolina.
Hmm.
He spent elementary and maybe some of middle school living in New Jersey, just had relocated for his dad's job, and then they moved back to North Carolina, and he went to high school in North Carolina, and then he went to college at Duke. And so yeah, he in his formative years he was in Yankee Central area,
Sure,
right? So it was
sure.
actually a very local thing, and then even still to this day, there is no Major League Baseball team in in North Carolina, right? There are two
Hmm.
AAA teams, and there's a ton of other minor league teams, but that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And so,
My mom still thinks I care about the score of the Yankee game. We'll be on Zoom and she'll be like, "Oh, the Yankees lost." I'll be like, "Great." And she'll be like, "Don't you care?" It's like, "No,
yeah,
I don't. I just don't."
yeah.
Anyway.
So yeah, so for me, it was like a proximity thing. Like I grew up in Durham, as I mentioned, in our minor league team when I was really young. I want to say like 5, 6, 7 at most was the Durham Bulls from
With
the
Kevin
movie.
Costner.
Like, yeah, Bull Durham, all that good stuff. But they were the single A team for the Atlanta Braves, and so we got to see a lot of guys come through the Durham system that would go on to become Atlanta Braves. Not to mention my dad's parents had that since relocated to Atlanta after living in North Carolina. They relocated to the Atlanta suburbs, and so whenever I went down to see my grandparents, I could see some of the guys that I had seen in single A ball in the major leagues. They were the closest team. I think the Nationals are technically closer to where I grew up, but they didn't come into existence until well after my formative sports years. So
Yeah,
that's how I grew up as a Braves fan. But I kind of grew up like my dad, as I mentioned, went to Duke and he was a big Duke fan. And one of the big things for me, and this is sort of what sparked this conversation, right? As we get into less about like just personal histories, but more into sort of the nuts and bolts of like formation of it. My dad, Duke fan, because it was his college, very normal reason to like a place. And if you know much of anything about Duke, you know that their most hated, bitter rival is the University of North Carolina, which, 7, 8 miles away. And so I, as a little kid, decided that I was going to root for my dad's bitter rival school. Now, I will say this part of it, a large part of it, was to just language warning, just to be a little shit, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to be, counterintuitive. The other part of it is like my dad was not the sole influence on my sports fandom. My mom was a UNC fan. Her mom had worked at UNC for a number of years. My dad's dad had graduated from UNC, and I had tons of family members associated with both universities through many generations. So it was a bit of a dealer's choice. Um, in my family, but I definitely enjoyed having more of a rivalry with my dad on that kind of stuff, and still do to this day, because it's always been good spirited and fun. And so even when, like this past year, Duke beat the daylights out of Miami in football, he gives it to me when he's like, "What happened to your mighty football school?" And then our basketball team turns around and beats Duke in basketball, and I go, how's that vaunted basketball team doing?
Not
So
in the
it's
Final
it's
Four, I'll tell you that much.
yeah, it's a fun rapport, but it's also something that, like, looking back on it now that, like, I'm a Miami fan and we live in Florida, and it is a very reasonable solution. Like, I don't think that if I stayed a UNC fan my entire life, like let's say I'd gone to UNC, I don't think that I would live in Florida for any reason, but I don't think I would live in Florida and, like, try to impose my college fandom on my kids as much, right? Obviously, you have a different perspective on this, but, like, where I grew up, it was like you had to pick one of the local teams
Mm-hmm.
because they were big time programs and they were nationally relevant, and you had to pick them. You didn't get to, like, move from somewhere else and be like, "Oh, I'm a Ohio State fan or whatever." Like, no, Duke, UNC, or NC State if you're one of those kids, right?
Sure.
And so it's just kind of one of those things where I'm like, you know, it is weird, especially being in a state like Florida where it's very much same kind of, like, trichotomy there of FSU, Florida, or Miami. Like, who's your big school? Um, and it's weird now because I'm like, yeah, I'm a Miami fan, but, like, what if my kids decide that they want to root for the Gators or the Seminoles? How am I gonna
So,
how am I gonna deal with that?
so what I'll say, because you touched on a couple things. So being from Los Angeles, there were, a lot of people I grew up with. They were either USC or UCLA fans. Because I had New York parents, I had no allegiance to either school. I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
my dad went to Syracuse, so I wanted to root with my dad. I did the opposite thing you did, and I
Sure, you're a better son.
indeed I am. And so one of my favorite memories is actually the 0304 season. Just cheering on Carmelo Anthony and the Syracuse Orange to their only ever championship in the NCAA tournament, because like I had never seen uh, my dad just like so happy over something like in like the world of sports. Like it, even like
Mm-hmm.
when he would cheer with me and like the Lakers winning, this was just like, and as well as those, Yankees World Series I mentioned up top. This was something that truly he felt like a part of because he went to that school.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually, that same feeling is actually why one of the, probably the main reason why I care so much more about college sports than pro sports. Um,
Sure.
and even though I live just outside of DC, I very much want to impart Miami fandom on my kids. I'll say with my almost 4-year old, uh, she will say, "Is Go Miami on TV?" I want to watch Go Miami. Luckily, she really likes the color orange, so that's cool. There, there is the threat, not of Florida State or Florida, um, even though Florida has orange too. But the real threat is Clemson because they are orange and purple with a tiger paw. And during last basketball season, there were some iffy moments where I think she was feeling Clemson a little
Sure.
more than
Sure.
Miami. But every
Well,
time, but every time Miami scores a touchdown, I'll go yes, and then she'll jump up and go Miami and dance, and it's like I'm working on it. We're getting there, and
yeah.
yeah, so that's what I need to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter is very much in a go, part of what she has going for her in the Miami fandom space is the idea that not only did I go there, but my wife went there, right? So
Sure.
it's both of us. There is no competing force within our house.
Sure.
My mom roots for Miami because I'm an only child. I went there. My dad roots for Miami, except against Duke because an only child went there. They both
Mhm.
helped fund the venture,
Sure.
right?
That's
Make
how
that
my
happen.
dad feels about Miami and Michigan.
Right.
Yes.
And so it's one of those things where shouldn't have a ton of outside forces. That said, my wife's brother did go to Florida State. I texted with him quite a bit during football season, and I don't think he's out there scheming to uh, get my daughter to be an FSU fan, but I don't think he would do anything to stop her.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. But what's really working against my daughter is, or me, I don't really know who the person being worked against here is, the fact that the other two are public schools. And at the end of the day, like, we have set up a financial plan for her. Her college savings is to go to a public school, and anything else will involve student loans or scholarships or whatever. So it's sort of like I'm bracing myself for at some point in roughly 13 years to potentially have her going to one of those schools because it just
Have her
makes
go to UCF. Be a Knights fan. Big 12. No conflict.
it's a huge conflict because I'm not going to say anything about UCF fans. They come at you on Twitter. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, they just anyway.
Well,
Um,
well,
we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And
sure.
one of the nice things, it used to be a thing that we could sort of chirp about amongst rivals. But as someone who might be sending a kid to college there, like Florida and FSU have caught up to Miami in a lot of the objective rankings, much to my own chagrin for my own degree. But for my future prospects of my kids going somewhere, I'm like, hey, good stuff.
So, so
Still a while away, so they
uh,
could all tank.
as you know, I am a stubborn beehole when it comes to fantasy football, where I will not draft any player who attended Florida State, Florida, Notre Dame, or Ohio State. The four schools I truly hate. Because I am not in any of those states in which I would ever have to pay public tuition, in-state tuition
Right.
for those, I've also said that those are the four schools I will not pay for my daughters to attend. Some of you might say, that's really weird. But if my daughter, who lives just outside of DC, really thinks that Columbus, Ohio is the best place for her, well, then I've probably messed up. So I'm not going to. I'm not really going to worry about that. And if they get scholarships for any of those schools, they can go. I think my kids would be a weird fit at Notre Dame, but that's also private, and I'm not throwing down for that. But that's just me. I take my
I
fandom
I
seriously.
think here's what I think. I think that I think two things. I think one, I think you're full of bluster. And I think if your baby girl comes to you, either one of your baby girls comes to you with a well thought out case, and being especially your oldest is definitely a mini you, she's gonna have thought up the points, and you're just gonna be like here's why you should pay for me to go to Ohio State because it has this program that I really really want to do, and you're just gonna respond, who's gonna make me?
That's right.
Super villain question, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
um, but in all seriousness, I think if she comes to you as a 16, 17-year old and says, Dad, I really want to go here and here's why, like, I think you'll probably cave.
I'll
The
tell
second
her
thing I
make
think
sure her golf swing's better.
the second thing I think is that there's no
Yeah.
chance that this is going to be a situation that we're
Right.
actually
Yeah.
talking about. Like, I
Right.
just like that's a
Yeah.
one in a million shot.
And also, this is like an entirely different topic. But by the time our kids are in college, it's either going to be free or $1 million to send kids to school. Those are the two directions politics are trending. So we'll see.
Yeah,
Yeah. So none of this could really matter anyway. Um,
yeah. That's totally fair.
But let's. I want to pivot slightly. I did mention
Sure.
that. I obviously care a lot more about college sports. It's an investment in your college community, your degree, as you mentioned, there's those 4+ years in which you're like a part of this and like you go to more stuff. But with pro sports, I'm a Dodgers, Lakers, LA Kings. If I do ever watch MLS soccer, go Galaxy, go. And my wife is originally from New Jersey, so she's a Mets fan. So I will say, I remember when we first had kids, she was like, "Yeah, so they'll be like Miami fans and they'll root for the Mets," and I'm just kind of like, "Do we really want them to be that sad, that heartbroken?" But I will say,
You gotta end the Mets season in like early October and be
yeah,
like, that's just about the time the Canes start getting disappointing. So like,
yeah, we have
maybe
to,
we should, like
yeah. Let's switch
they
gears,
gotta wait until like April or
but
June and hope that the Lakers go deep in the playoffs.
right, but I will say I think about how like my parents tried to influence the Yankees on my brother and I. And it was really annoying actually when like all of your friends are rooting for your local team and like you come wearing like everyone you wear a Yankee hat to a Dodger game and you're just like, man, this is not fun. So I will
And
say if my daughters get into the Dodgers with me, get into the Lakers naturally, that's fine. But they've got, as you mentioned, the Southern Expos, also known as the Nationals, right by. There's the Washington Wizards. There's the Commanders. There is tons of opportunity locally for
Mhm.
them to,
Yeah.
not be a transplant.
Even the Orioles and the Ravens are like
Yeah.
sensible
Oh
choices,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 I mean, we
So
played in
I mean,
Maryland. So
you've got several things, and
yeah.
I'm going to take the same tact with pro
Yeah.
sports. Right, I'm a Panthers fan. I'm a Hornets fan. I mentioned I grew up in North Carolina. I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan, and I don't find myself being as actively vocal about that where I live
Yeah.
because it's just, every now and then, like I went down with a good friend for a Hornets Heat game. Spoiler alert, the Hornets, who are a perpetual lottery team, were not in the playoffs, so I don't get a playoff game. And it's like, maybe I would go down for like a Braves Marlins game.
Hmm.
I was actually going to do that in the MLB playoffs. I bought a ticket for if the Marlins beat the Phillies, and then they would have played the Braves, and I could have gone down and seen them. But alas, that didn't happen. But I think with the pro sports, like so much of my pro sports fandom is tied to regionality.
Hmm.
You
Same.
know, in such a way that just like now for me, the thing I'd say even on the college spectrum though is like where I grew up, it's the same kind of thing on like a college level, right? Where it was just like, yeah, some people liked the Panthers, some people liked the Hurricanes, people liked the Hornets, but other than the Hurricanes that were close by, the Hornets and the Panthers were 2 hours away, and they were all formed after we were born. Like they were
Right.
both formed after we were born. Not the Hornets, but the Panthers were, and the Hornets. They just it was very easy for people to be fans of Michael Jordan or
Hmm.
to be fans of Patrick Ewing or to be fans of some of the superstars of our youth, the Lakers, Kobe, Shaq, that kind of stuff. Um, and I don't think I would tie my daughter to that because it's just very weird. Where I'm just like, maybe you grow up being a Dolphins fan or a Bucks fan or a Jags fan, and maybe you grow up being a Marlins fan, and I'm sorry. Maybe you grew up being a Heat fan and like congrats.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of angles that it can go, but yeah, I don't think for me, it's like my dad roots for the Panthers, he roots for the Hurricanes, roots a little bit for the Hornets, although he grew up, before the Hornets existed, obviously before the Panthers existed. Um, and so he's like a Celtics fan, which is like a weird mix of being a Celtics and a Yankees fan. He was a big Larry Bird guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're loving that. I mean, if
It's
he did
disgusting.
like Celtics, Yankees, and then like 70, not I guess not 76ers, but like Eagles. Throw like the Eagles in there. He's not an Eagles fan,
That's
but you
that
get
that's
like the
disgusting.
trifecta.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be
We We have as you know, we have a mutual fraternity brother. We'll just call him Bomb Buert, who grew up as a Yankees fan, UNC basketball, Notre Dame football, and Dallas Cowboys NFL. And then I'm just like, I hate you. Like what are you doing? Anyway, that's the
Yeah,
real
I mean
system.
it's yeah, um but back to the point. Yeah, I think it's this is like one of those topics that is just like I think for me what I'm hoping that my daughter gets from it, right? And something that I want to pursue with her is the teams that I feel most attached to are the Miami Hurricanes and the
Same
Atlanta
as us.
Braves of the ones
Yeah.
I've mentioned, right? Like I might go see the Hornets, I might go see a Panthers game. Yes, it doesn't help their cause that both of those Charlotte-based teams are pretty pathetic right now. Right? They are bad. One had the number 2 pick in the draft, one had the number 1 pick in the draft. They're bad. But it's also the family memories, right? I went to a lot of baseball games with my dad. I went to baseball games with my grandpa, my uncle, like various people in Atlanta. And then Hurricanes games are something that like I went to with a lot of friends, right? I went to with my wife. I still go with my wife. And those are the types of things that I want to build with my daughter where it's like, yeah, we live within distance of the stadium to go down and see a Hurricanes game. It takes about an hour and a half to get to the football stadium, about 2 hours to get to campus in the basketball stadium. And so, one of the things that I'm really actually excited to do this season is take my daughter, just me and her, to a Canes hoops game, right? And see because like your daughter during the Final Four run last year, she was just like very very into it, right?
Mhm.
Like she really got into the basketball. She got into Miami. She was learning her numbers and watching the scoreboard and learning how to do it and figuring out she's like, okay, which color is Miami? I'm like, they're the white one or they're the green one or whichever color they were, and helping her do that. And it got to a point that last year for the Final Four game that we played against UConn was a Saturday night, right? And it was like a 9:40 tip. And my wife and I made the decision. I like we both did it, but we turned off all notifications on everything. We flipped on Netflix. We watched something that wasn't basketball, and then woke up in the morning, had recorded the game, and watched it with my daughter, with our
Oh
daughter.
wow.
Like
Wow.
we
I
did
didn't know
not
you
watch
did
that
that.
Final Four game in real time. Didn't check any of the group chats. Didn't have any notifications on. Just were on do not disturb indefinitely until the morning. And then Sunday morning, while we ate our pancakes and watched, we fast forwarded through commercials and watched Miami get a beatdown.
Yeah, that was oh man. Yeah.
But we did that because my daughter was like really invested and she had been watching a lot of the games because they were like 7 o'clock, and I'd like let her watch at least like the first half or like stay up a little bit late because she was like feeling it and she was so into it that since relocated to it. So yeah, I mean we like recording and turning off notifications for a whole Final Four game, that sort of set the wheels in motion where I'm like, I don't want to take her to a football game because it is loud, it's hot, it's long, it's hard to move around. I'm like, but a basketball game, you're inside, you're climate controlled, it's much shorter, and I can probably take her to a game that won't necessarily have as big of a crowd.
Yeah.
Plus, we can get pretty close to the action and all that kind of stuff, and it's just not quite as much walking, and there's a lot of good points to it, but
Yeah.
uh, up to this point her only live sports have been the local minor league baseball teams, which is just
Mhm.
that's not something you get attached to. That may breed a love for the sport, but
Sure.
like, those players are so transient that there's absolutely no chance that you're going to care about the guy that played first base for the Jupiter Hammerheads in 10 years unless he happens to be a future Hall of Famer with the Marlins, right?
Right. So we took our the girls to their first baseball game um at the end of toward the end of the regular season. My
On
friend's
your
mom.
anniversary, yeah?
Yes, that's right. That was our anniversary. The Dodgers happened to be playing the Nats, and my friend's mom, who has Nats season tickets, was out of town, so she let us use the tickets. The little ones under two, so she got in free. We got her three
Yeah,
tickets, so it was a great time. And luckily it was the Dodgers. It did rain a bunch, and all they cared about was the food. But that's kind of how I was as a kid too. But when you mentioned the Final Four run, what was also great is that the women's tournament was awesome, and the Miami women had an Elite Eight run.
yeah,
And I do make an effort to watch more women's sports because I have daughters. I will admit that prior to having daughters, I did not put in this effort.
sure,
But that said, there have been some changes to the game and just like the personalities in general, where women's basketball, I think, has gotten a lot better over the last couple of years than it
sure.
was in the past.
Yeah, I
Um,
think the product
yeah,
on the court is better. The promotion's better.
yeah,
They're doing a much better job of promoting individual, and I think part of that's probably the NIL era.
yeah,
Like, say what you will about it, but being able to like compensate players for promotions
mhm,
and getting them involved, I think has helped
yeah,
the
yeah.
visibility of a lot of
Like
kids.
the fact that I could just come out here and say Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and they're not on the Miami squad is not something I could do 5 years ago. Naming our
Sure,
but
there were a couple.
Paige Bucher. Like I could name way
We got
more
like
women.
the
Yeah,
Candace Parkers of the
yeah,
world. I mean, like
sure, but
there was
yeah,
like see, I remember like Candace Parker from like trying to be in the dunk
yeah,
contest in the McDonald's
yeah,
All
and
American game. So it's not always,
mhm,
unfortunately, it's
yeah,
not always like
right,
the hardest core.
or
Like
yeah.
women's who Skylar Diggins. Like I remember some
Yeah,
names.
I remember Lisa Leslie because she also did like
Sure,
she was in LA, so she like
yeah,
parlayed some
Diana
like acting into
Taurasi.
it. Yeah,
I don't
but
know. Like it's one of
yeah,
those where I grew up in an atmosphere where like UNC and Duke had good women's basketball teams as
right,
well.
right,
They have national champion.
mhm,
Maybe I don't want to misspeak, but they definitely have deep tournament runs.
yeah,
At least a national championship or two or three between the programs, but
right,
enough of a history to like not just be second fiddle to what the men have going on.
right,
And
and
so like it was definitely
and
a
you
part
yeah
of my
yeah
sports growing up.
and UNC soccer is like one of the most dominant teams in like all of sports. In that like ever since
Yeah.
their current head coach has been on board, any woman who has been in the program all 4 years has won a national championship. At
Yeah,
least
something like
yeah.
that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's still the. I don't know if that fact still. It was definitely true when I was a kid,
yeah,
and I'm sure they've been just keeping it rolling. But I mean, that was like
yeah,
at the height
yeah. I mean,
of like
it was
women's
deep.
soccer. It was like
Yeah,
he was doing that, crushing that, and Mia Hamm is a
yeah,
UNC alum, and so like she was absolutely crushing it on the world stage. Women's
right.
World Cup, Team
Megan
USA
Rapinoe.
emerges as this dominant force, but
Yeah,
yeah, I don't do as good of a job as I would like to on the women's sports thing of like watching it in front of my daughter because I'm not always seeking it out. And like half the time, I feel like, it depends on the situation, right? Like I don't
mhm,
always just flip on sports to have something on the TV because I think my daughter will get like glued to it because she's like, I want dopamine, like I want screen
right.
time, but I'm not
So
like actually interested in this thing.
yeah,
And so yeah,
and
I should make a more concerted effort for women's
so,
sports.
so not to plug Xfinity because I truly hate them to my core, but their
Okay.
product is solid. Especially they have a button that basically brings up everything they have on sports, like just like in a list where under like the
Mhm.
watch now, and it's just literally everything, and it's broken down by sports. So I can go to
Yeah.
WNBA, what's on now, NCAA women's basketball, women's soccer, you name it, tennis, whatever. And I can, like, if I'm sitting with my older daughter, I can say to her, like, what sport do you want to watch? And she could be like, basketball. And then I could say, boys or girls? And she'll say, girls. So I do
Right.
also make it like an opportunity for her to like tell me what she wants to watch. But
Yeah,
a
and I
lot of
mean,
it
you
is
can
like
do that with a
background.
lot of interfaces, though, of like
Yeah.
searching for it. I think my point is I am rarely like at a point in my life when the kids are awake. doing
Mm,
something where I am just going, hey, this is our sports watching block. Fill in the blank of what you want to watch. It's like, no, I want to watch the Braves game right now, or I am
mm.
intending to watch
So,
Monday Night Football right now. I am
right.
not intending to say, hey, we're going to flip on some sports. What do you want to watch? It's like, no, it's the final round of the
Oh,
Masters or,
right.
Wimbledon final, whatever
Sure.
the major thing is usually why I'm watching. And
So, so
this past weekend was more of an exception of just like having more wall to
mhm,
wall sports because it was just me and my
right.
son and we were just hanging out.
And I will say that the uh, I'm with you in that. Like, if I'm planning to watch something, I'm planning to watch something. But I do the muted sports or Food Network on in the background a lot of times. Like, I'll be playing with the girls. We'll be like, on the floor doing other stuff. But it's like I
Yeah,
do I do like being able to like look in, and so that's when it's like if it's not something I like need to hear, it's usually like any random
yeah,
sporting event, whatever looks most interesting,
yeah.
or the
We're
food
making more of
network.
a we made more of a concerted effort. We have made more of a concerted effort to just like not have the TV on just if we're not if we would mute it, then we should just have the TV. Like we can
It's
check back in
a
on it. It's sort of our
yeah,
attitude, and it's not
exactly.
a right wrong scenario,
Yeah.
but it for us it's very much like a because like I said, like my daughter will stop what she's doing and just like
Uh,
stare at the moving
mine,
pictures, and stuff, and just
mine
like
will keep playing. Yeah.
right. And so my son will, which was exactly why I was sort of like testing this theory by having
Mhm.
football on that I wasn't really necessarily watching, but doing that with him. And he was totally fine. He napped just fine. Like he in fact was like eating lunch and like watching some football a little bit. And like I'm like, all right, bud, we got to get you to nap. You're
Right.
falling asleep in your chair here. Um, and then the same thing at bedtime. I didn't have any issues with it, and he was not like sitting there glued to it. Like he'd say something if a mascot was like an animal that he
Mhm.
recognized, or if it wasn't and he thought it was, like he'd just start saying the name of that
Mhm.
animal. Bird, bird, bird. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
I got it. It's a bird, bird, dad, bird. And I'm like, okay, got it. Can
Mhm.
we watch? Okay. Um, but yeah,
So So I will say, like your son, I'm falling asleep in my chair. So um, to kind of um, to kind of bring this discussion back to our relationship with fandom and like parenting.
mm-hmm,
I've mentioned before, I believe that our job as parents is to keep our kids safe, healthy, ideally happy. That
mm-hmm,
said, I want nothing more than my daughters to feel and share my highs and lows in the drug that we call fandom of
yeah,
the Miami Hurricanes until they choose whatever school they're going to go to, except the four I mentioned before. Um, where I hope that they, my wife went to a school that that doesn't have sports really. Like I'd say once every 4 decades, their men's and women's basketball teams make the tourney. But where I feel like she missed out is that she didn't have all those social events. There are a lot of people who you and I both know that they didn't care so much about the sports itself. They cared about that, like on Saturdays, what did everybody do? You went to the game. And
yeah.
that was like there were parties around it. That's how you met people. And
Mhm.
I hope that there is a sports culture wherever my daughters go to school because um, it's fun and frankly, like you know, I think it's really beneficial. Like just as like I want my daughters to understand football because it's
Yeah.
really annoying when
I,
they
to
don't.
I think to say what a version of what you're saying in a different way to put a bow on it
Yeah.
is I don't want sports to be a me thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want it to be that thing that daddy really cares about. Oh, like daddy's watching the
Yeah.
game, like dad's doing this, dad's going to the game. Like, I want it to be sort of that like community thing, right? Like with my kids as something that I can share and enjoy because it was something that was such a big like connecting point of my childhood. Like, in addition to going to games with my dad, like he was either my coach or an assistant coach for a lot of the years I was in like little league, and it's just very much a part of like my childhood in a way that I connected. And because it's something I'm interested in, that's not to say that I won't find interest in whatever my kids are doing, but it's just a lot easier when it's like, hey, yeah, I can like sort of show you about this thing that I think is really cool, and maybe you'll think it's really cool too, and see where it goes from there, right? Because I want to
Mm.
have sort of that kinship, and it doesn't necessarily to me have to mean that they root for the same teams, but even if they're just like interested in the same sports, like that's
Yeah.
a good starting point
Sure.
of things we can watch together.
I think one of my favorite things is when I'm watching football and my daughter looks and there's a penalty thrown, and she'll run up to the TV and yell, "You're not listening. Do better. Daddy's getting upset. You're making red choices." And then, which is funny when they throw a yellow flag that it's a red choice.
Yeah,
But anyway, yeah,
yeah,
it's funny.
she'd love soccer.
Oh yeah, oh
That was
yeah.
a red
Well,
choice.
yeah, that was a red choice. And then I guess in football there's the red challenge flag. But
Yeah,
that's
it's
boring.
only a red
Yeah,
choice if you get it wrong.
that's true. Yeah.
Anyway, are we doing a working on the dad bod tonight?
Yeah, I did my nude weigh in anticipation of
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. The mental. I'll
Why
go
don't
ahead and go
you
first.
yeah, please.
I didn't check what I was at last time. Um, this time I was at 183.5. Right.
Okay.
So it's about where I've been. I think last time I was at like 183, 184. It's about where I've been. I have not been making the progress I've wanted to be making. There's been a couple of factors. Last
Hmm.
week I started a new job that's requiring just more meetings, a little bit more time sitting at my desk. Um, you know, considering an under desk elliptical, but also just sort of getting that rhythm so I can figure out what times I can do things like go on walks, because I'm also in
Hmm.
a point in my strength training where I am doing like I'm in a max strength phase, which, as I mentioned before, is like fewer reps, longer rests. My heart rate doesn't get as high. My calorie burn's not as high. And you combine that with like less movement throughout the day. And I'm like, I think that's probably why I'm like in this static place, because I'm eating the same foods. I'm not tracking as diligently. I'm not doing some crazy overeating, but the change where I would see weight loss is being made up in the fact that I'm just not moving as much as I have been um,
Yeah.
in the
So
past few weeks.
yeah, so it's been about 2.5 weeks since we last recorded. I went from 191 that day to 191.8.
Okay.
As you mentioned, that's a few factors. Today is November 2nd. So I've had leftover from the middle of October. I've had like leftover like birthday dessert. I've went to a wedding.
Yeah.
I there was something else, and then yeah, we just had Halloween, and I have been going to town on candy because it's literally in every room, and I'm a child and I can't stop myself. So
Yeah.
yeah, that probably hasn't helped. So that's I'm accounting for that zero point 0.8 pound, and it's getting colder here. We dealing with not wanting to walk around outside as much, or
Yeah.
so dealing with
Yeah,
that.
obviously we're actually getting into a great part of the year for us where it's like lovely to walk outside most any time of the day. And
Right.
so that has actually been, I've tried to get in a couple of walks with my wife. So I'm hoping that I can get that rhythm and just get back dialed in on like the calorie counting, because I feel like I'm like jumping from meeting to meeting and I'm not always logging things, and then I sort of get behind on the logging, and instead of catching up, I just
Mm-hmm.
go, I feel like I'm roughly here, right?
Right.
And I'm not doing the math, and that's probably hurting me. But on
Mm-hmm.
the flip side, I did invent a new high protein breakfast. So I've got something new instead of the breakfast casserole that I had been
Tell,
doing, that I
tell
tried this
us.
week. It's a buffalo chicken breakfast wrap.
Nice.
So it's
Nice.
got it's got chicken breast. It's got 0% fat Greek yogurt, which I usually use the full fat stuff, but fewer calories, same amount of protein with the 0% fat stuff. It's got egg whites and eggs, like I previously had, some broccoli, some cheese, and it's wrapped up in one of those like carb balanced tortillas, so lower carb, higher protein content.
What
Then
what are you using the yogurt for?
uh, protein.
No, but look, I guess I'm just like because I'm like buffalo chicken, sure.
Mhm.
Eggs, sure. Cheese, sure. I guess is like so. What role is the yogurt playing?
It's a creaminess. It's a creaminess
Mm,
factor.
okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm mixing the yogurt with the buffalo sauce, with the French
Oh,
sauce, and
oh,
that's
okay.
creating
All
sort of
right,
like a
gotcha.
buffalo yogurt thing that's then getting mixed with
Just
the
a
eggs, because what I this is my
okay,
first week doing it.
like
So
an
like
aioli.
first, sure. And so like the
Mm,
first time I did it, instead of like taking out a pan and doing all the eggs that way, because the egg whites without the fat in them, they really like stick to the pan, because I usually use a cast iron pan. So I actually baked them. So I baked
mm,
them until they were mostly firm, and then like mixed them around in the pan, and then like threw them on. That probably dried them out a little bit, so it wasn't like these nice, gooey, creamy scrambled eggs. It's
sure.
more just like it's more like chopped egg for like egg salad mix. And then if you think of it
Mm,
like that egg salad consistency, that's where the yogurt comes in and the cheese comes in, and it sort of makes it that creaminess.
gotcha.
And I'd like shredded the chicken, and so it's just all mixed together, so I could then just like divide it out evenly, instead of having to put the chicken down and the eggs down and the yogurt
Hmm.
down in separate things. I just mixed it into one, orange buffalo
Yeah, no,
like
I'm
dip
I'm with
almost,
you.
and
Okay,
and then put it in.
because
So
as you
that's
know,
why
I
it was
yeah.
also an effort. The Greek yogurt, I was just playing around with the various ingredients and trying to figure out what the macros were. But according to my calculator, it is 68 grams of protein and 499 calories. So it has about 20 more grams of protein than my breakfast casserole and about 60 more calories. So um, big win in that
Yeah,
department.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Okay.
so I've been trying that out this week. We'll see. It's a little bit more intensive to make, but
Hmm.
maybe that's because it's my first time doing it and I can refine that process. But yeah, I've sort of taken that as my new thing of like I get even more protein at breakfast so that I don't have to feel like I'm quite as limited in my snacks, as I go through the day, or if I don't have as many opportunities to snack early on, I don't make bad decisions at lunch, because like my protein intake's been pretty high, and I'm not about to go, oh yeah, I'm just going to munch on some extra chips or whatever, that
Hmm.
I'm not actually hungry for. So yeah.
Cool. Cool.
Well, all right, man. You got anything
Yeah.
else on sports?
Go Canes, man.
Yeah, this is gonna be coming out probably like the week after the Florida State game. So let's hope
Mm.
any takes in here age well.
Yeah, yeah. I don't feel good about that game, but
No,
hope I'm wrong.
no. Mark me down as predicting a loss. That
Close.
way, if we win, I don't get to say I told you so.
It's fair.
Actually, could have done the opposite. Who knows?
Fair.
That would have kind of been cool. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, thank you guys for working on the Dad Pod with us. Sorry, it feels like we're rambling a little bit here at the end. Um, I think we're both a little tired, but next week we'll be back in your feeds. Something else awesome. Catch you guys later.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for working on the Dad Pod with us. Any resources that we mentioned during the show will be in the show notes. If you have questions, thoughts, or just want to talk with us, the best place is in the comments on YouTube. We're on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads at Working on the Dad Pod, and on Twitter at Working on Dad Pod. Following and subscribing is always appreciated. Please rate and review us. That helps get the show to new people. And if you know a dad who would enjoy our show, sharing it with them is a huge help to them and us. Have a great week.